right, so today we are going to print a linoleum block, right? And this linoleum block has different marks in it. You know, it's got marks from a V gouge, real small marks, and it has marks from a U gouge, and some, you know, that are in between. So there's a variety of marks there. And what I'm going to do is roll ink over the top. And it will collect in some of these spots, but these will basically be my whites. And I'm using oil-based ink. And let me also point out, I've got closed-toed shoes on. I've got my apron, and I have a pair of gloves. Now, the thing that's missing while we're in COVID is my mask. I will give you an in-person demo with a mask on, and we will be in class with masks on. But right now, I'm the only person in the room, except for my videographer, and we're related. So I'm gonna give you this so I can talk loud and clearly. And you can refer to this if any of the part with the mask on is unclear. All right, so I've got my block, I've got newsprint to proof on, I've got an ink and a modifier. This modifier is called gelled medium. It's pretty filthy, the label, but this is the only modifier that is in a white plastic can. Now I want to show you these two brayers. This is a clean, nice sprayer, but it is cheap. I would not use it for this project. These are heavier brayers. They're expensive. They're really great. They have to be cleaned extremely carefully, but they're perfect for this project. I picked this size because it spans the block. I don't have to do anything like, you know, to fill it in like this. It covers the block in one roll, and that is super convenient. So this is an etching press, but you can print many things on it. And the way that it works is it has a top roller, this guy up here, and then underneath here it has a bottom roller. Right there. And in between these two rollers is the bed, the press bed. And the press bed moves back and forth. You can print this way, you can print that way. And what happens is, when the bed moves back and forth, it squeezes the print that's in between the bed and the top roller. And right now, the top roller is stationary. It's not moving because it needs something under there to get rolling. And that thing that's under there is going to be our linoleum block. Okay, so let's go over here. We're gonna set out the ink and then we'll ink up the block. Okay, so I've got some skin on top of my ink. I've got some dark brown ink. It's very dark brown. It probably looks like this. This is called a pull down. It's when you test the color that you have. And the way that you do a pull down is you get a piece of paper, and they're usually right down here. And you can mix a color. I'm just using one straight out of the can just for the ease of the demo, but you can mix a color just like you mix paint. You know, you add the weaker color, you have the weaker color out, and then you put the stronger color in, bit by bit. Now this looks black, but if you look at it closely, it's a very, very dark brown, okay? And like I said, this is oil-based ink, so this will require special cleanup and it will dry slowly. Now, in order to make this a little tiny bit easier to roll, I'm gonna put the gelled medium in. And a modifier, you know, kind of broadly defined, a modifier changes the quality of the ink. It can make it drier, it can make it slicker, and it also can make it less sticky. And this ink is kind of sticky coming out of the can. And instead of sticky, in printmaking we say tacky. And so this gelled medium is what we call a tack reducer. It makes the ink slicker and easier to roll out. Okay, so I'm ready to roll it out. I've got my brayer here, and I'm gonna lay out a ribbon of ink that's just as wide. as the brayer. I think I probably mixed up just the right amount of ink. And then I'm gonna go away, toward me, spin, away, toward me, spin. And I do that so the brayer doesn't roll through the same 2 ribbons of ink the whole time. If it spins, it'll hit a new part of the brayer. And that's what I want. I want this field of ink, we call it the slab. I want the slab of ink to be as even as possible so we can go onto the linoleum block as evenly as possible. Okay, so listen to this sound. You hear a little hiss? That's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear you want to hear a little hiss, and it might be that I have not quite enough ink. We'll see. But I'm going to roll over this. You know, and you can see right away that the flat parts are rolling up with ink, and the parts that are carved away are not. You know, they're recessed. And this brayer does not roll into the recessed parts. It's a firm brayer. And I'm going over it several times. And if this is a first proof, you're feeling your way, which is fine. And I can tell by looking at this that this is going to print, I think, a little bit light. You can see that there are some little speckles in here. That's the linoleum showing through. And so just to, you know, again, for the expediency of showing you some success in the demo, I'm just gonna put just a little bit more ink down. And that way, hopefully, I'll hit it the first time. We are gonna print on newsprint to proof. So don't worry if the print doesn't look the way you want it to, because really you're just out the newsprint. You're not printing on good paper until you get a good print on newsprint, right? So you're proofing on newsprint. And I'm gonna try and load this up just a little bit, see how I'm going multiple directions. Starting to look a little bit more full. Okay. So let's print this and see how it looks. I'm gonna take my gloves off because they're inky, they may be inky, and I'm gonna do the next part here with clean hands for the most part. So, on the press bed, you make a sandwich. I'm gonna put newsprint down, which I have sitting here. I'm gonna put 1 newsprint down, and then the block, and then 3 newsprints and a tympan. A tympan is a flat surface. It can be made of many things. This is just made of some thin board. And the tympan sits on top of everything against this roller. It's the thing that rolls against the roller. Okay, so paper. Block. And I'm not thinking about borders or anything. I'm just laying the paper down. I just want to get an impression of a linoleum cut. I'm not thinking about presentation or formality or anything. Okay, so the pressure's set. At least it's a good starting point, and I can feel where my block is. And I'm gonna put a gentle hand at the very edge of the block. You can see it's not engaging, the roller's not moving. And there it is. That means the block is under it. And you pass through. You can also feel when the block is there because it gets just a little bit resistant. I'm gonna still the top roller. And then I'm gonna take a look at what I've printed, and it will give me an idea of what is supposed to happen next. Okay, so that looks like a good, I would say maybe even an excellent first proof. And I think maybe it goes this way. Don't be upset if you don't have a full print like this. I have been doing prints for years, and so I know what it looks like, what it's supposed to feel like, but you might find it's too light. It's just the wrong value. You know, it's not fully inked. And you might find that it is too heavily inked. If you can look at your block and see find areas that are filled in with ink, that block is too heavily inked. You want to get all the detail that you put in there. No more, no less. All right, so this is we're in an ideal world here. I've got a great first proof. And now I'm going to switch to my good paper, okay? So I'm gonna do the exact same thing. Ink it up as I did. And then I'm gonna print on the good paper with registration. So since you saw me do this first, there's no need to watch this again. You know, you can always rewind the video if you want, but I'm gonna do the exact same thing. Okay, so I have inked up my block the same way, doing exactly the same things. And now I'm gonna print it on the good paper that you have, the really white, thin Asian paper, and I'm gonna do it in registration. So that means you're gonna use this L-shaped, well, it's an L. That's what I've made for you. And you're going to tuck this right into the corner of the L. And these lines dictate where the paper goes, okay? So this white paper has a very smooth side and a pretty rough side. I think you can pretty much tell by feel. And I'm not exactly sure which is the best side to print on. You can certainly print on both. But I'm going to take a guess and say that the rough side is better to print on because it will grab the block better and grab the ink better. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use these. This is the top mark. And the longer one is the side mark, and I'm carefully lining it up. And it goes like that, right? So it's pretty well within this shape. And so that will ensure that the borders are even. Let's see. Looks like I need one more piece of newsprint. And then the tympan goes back on. This tympan has been printed on a couple of times. You can see that will happen accidentally through the semester. And I replace these as we need them replaced. We have more than one in the room. Okay, so I'm just running this through. It doesn't matter if you print fast or slow. Don't print too fast because you may accidentally, move the block. Now this roller, it does tend to roll like that. Let's hope that it didn't move anything underneath it. Looks like it shifted everything but the paper that it printed on. Okay, so you can see this is even. I'm gonna put a firm hand on here. And it looks pretty good. It is rolled up. It's all, like I mentioned in the handout, it's all or nothing. You don't see a half tone, mid-tone here. There's no mid-tone. It's either printing 100% or not printing. Okay? If you want mid-tones, you carve out sections where the lines are very close together, even closer than this, more like these little tiny ones. Okay, so you can trim the bottom if you want, and we'll talk about tearing paper. But since I'm satisfied with this, you know, I'm gonna put it on the rack here to air dry. When you use the rack, you put everything close in here by the hinge. And that way, if someone wants to get lower down, they can just lift it up and my print stays there. It doesn't fall through the crack or on someone else's print. Okay, so it seems like a waste of space, but no matter your size, always put it in there, okay? Now, let's say I've done all the printing I'm gonna do for the day. So I want to show you how to sort of close your system down, close your workstation down, clean it up, and then you can leave the room. Okay, so if the newsprint is not printed on, someone else can use it. And there's usually a designated newsprint pile somewhere in the room. It's often on this corner here. So someone else can use that since it's clean. The tympan can be used again because it's clean. And often it goes right here on our stored press. I'm going to take my block out. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Well, I'll take my registration out. With oil-based ink, when you're printing on linoleum, you never wash the block. And let's say I was going to do more prints. I wouldn't wash this in between prints unless I'm changing the color radically. But you never actually wash the linoleum. What you do is you strip it down. You don't want to get the linoleum wet, whether it's water or with any other cleaner. So what I'm going to do is run it through the press without inking it. And so I'm taking off the remaining ink that didn't go onto the nice paper. You can see you get light versions. Right? Oh, this is what I did my newsprint proof on. And you can see this is it fully inked. This is the ghost. And so what I'm going to do is just keep running this through until it's a lot lighter. And you know, sometimes that takes 4 prints, sometimes it takes 10, right? But you want to see very little coming off the block. See, here it is. Here's the second one. Actually, that's the second ghost of that. Maybe I'll do this so we can really see what we're doing. I'll do a full, oh, here we go. Well, that sort of is the way that you can see it. See how it's getting lighter? And here we'll do, you always want to have a clean surface against the roller. You don't want to print onto the roller. And in fact, you can also use the tin pen. It might give you a little bit more oomph to strip your block down, just as long as you're not accidentally printing on the tin pen or the top roller. Okay. So I've done it 3 times, and that's actually not enough. You want to have a lighter, you want to have it be a lot lighter. But you know, for the sake of the demo, let's say, so I did it 3 times, let's say I'm going to run it through 5 more times on clean newsprint. And that way, I can handle the block without getting my hands really dirty. And if I'm going to use a proof as a reference, I can just take this to my working station, you know, and kind of work on it like this, using this as a guide and carving out new marks with my tools. If you do that, and this has been printed that day, you put on some gloves, because if you're putting your hand in here, you know, and kind of working on it, you will get some. If you're laying on it, laying your hand on it, you will get some. Okay, so let's pretend here that I've rolled it through a lot and it's very, very light. Ready to work with. I'm going to either put this in the clean pile if it's clean, or I'm going to recycle it, you know, what I don't need. And then I'm going to center the press. That means the press bed goes in the middle. This is a machine, and machines like to be in a neutral position. And it also extends the life of the press. If it's on one end all the time, it will end up preferring to be on that end. And we want it to prefer to be in a neutral position. Okay, so now we're gonna switch to cleaning. Okay, so I've got my gloves back on and I'm ready to clean up. And because, again, this is oil-based ink, you can't put the brayer in the sink and wash it. I find that almost every semester, and it's a futile exercise. You need to use an oil-based cleanup product. We don't use, you know, mineral spirits or turpentine or anything like that. That's an old school cleanup product, and it is not good for you. Neither of those things are good for you. In fact, they're quite bad for you. So what I'm going to do first is do as much cleanup as I possibly can without a product. Right, so I've got a nice blade here, and I'm scraping it up. This is not an ink knife. It's a blade, and it's in our classroom just for this purpose. And of course, when we do the demo in person, I will show you where all these are located. Okay, so I've got a good amount up. To me, it looks like over half, right? can clean up this business here. And since this is mostly spent here, I'm also going to remove that with the blade. Now, if you have a big pile here, you know, and you have a lot more ink that you're going to use later, you can wrap it up in tin foil or saran wrap, and you make a little pod of ink that has no air in the saran wrap, and that way it won't dry. You can just use it later. Okay, so I'm going to strip a fair bit of the ink from the brayer on this dirty newsprint, right? It's not usable again. And I can even fold this. And the more ink you can get off, the less cleanup product has to go onto the brayer. And as I mentioned, these are very, very expensive brayers, so we need to clean them super, super carefully. And I can clean the counter at the same time as I clean my brayer. Okay, so I have the only cleanup product that's in a dish bottle is roller cleaner, and it will also clean the slab. And I'm gonna start with a semi-dirty rag, right? These sort of dirty rags you find in a red bin, all right? And that is because we want to start with a semi-dirty one and save the really clean ones for the fine tune-up cleaning, right? The end of the cleaning process. So this has, excuse me, this has dish soap in it and some oil and some water. So it naturally separates when it's not being used. So I give it a really good shake. And I'm gonna coat my roller in it. And at the same time, I'm kind of working it over the glass. And then I'm going to go around the whole surface, get a little bit more here, and try to move around the ink so it will come off the brayer better. And notice I'm putting this sprayer down always on its feet, right? So the roller never touches the glass. If you have the roller sitting on the glass like this, it's going to go out of round. And we don't want that. We want these brayers to be around for a long, long time. Okay, so I can have it sit on its feet and roll it around, and each time get some ink off of this rubber surface. And you'll see it stops being shiny as I'm getting the ink off. And I get to a sort of a new spot in the rag. And keep covering the surface. And at a certain point, I notice that it looks pretty clean. I'm gonna go around the edges. We don't want to have ink dry on this part. And once I feel like it looks clean, then I'm going to use a white rag to make sure that it is clean and also that it's dry. And you might find that you're putting a fair bit of lint on the rag, but I'd much rather that it be linty and clean rather than inky. If ink stays on this rubber surface for too long of a time, it dries there, and then the ink doesn't roll out fully because the dried ink is blocking it. Okay. So if you're going to clean up while you're in the studio, dedicate at least 15 minutes to clean up. You don't want to rush, and if you don't have that 15 minutes for cleanup, you really have no business coming into the studio to work. So work that into your time. Okay, so this looks nice and clean. See how it's dull, it's not shiny with ink? I'm gonna set it aside on its feet and put it away once I'm done with this. So I've got a wet slab, it's got some ink on it, and I can just go ahead and use a little bit of muscle and work this around, and at the same time, I'm going to take the ink off of my knives. And you don't want to just do this. You want to go face, face, and then edge. Because if someone uses, let's say someone's using some yellow ink after I use this to print, if I don't get the sides here, my brown ink is going to go into the yellow can of ink, and it will, pervert the color essentially. So you have to be diligent, and that really means being respectful of the other artists that are working in here. Okay. So I'm getting this whole slab, and then the very last thing that I'm going to do before I put away all my products and inks and things like that is I'm going to do a little bit of simple green, okay? The way to get something out of this red can, you have to push this down like that. I see lots of people going like this and wondering where the product is. Push this down, and then you can pour it out. You can see it's diluted. If you use simple green that's not diluted, it's really caustic. So this is the last step. And you can see that there are little bits of ink stuck in the cracks that are in the glass. That is of no consequence. That is something that happens when we have older things in the shop. And when you have a printmaking studio, you never get rid of something until you absolutely have to. And the ink in these cracks is not going to do anything to my print, to the brayer, to anything else. Okay, so once this is completely clean, oil-free, I can put away my products, whether it's recycling, putting back in cans, and then I'm ready to go. Now, as for COVID cleanup, I will show you that in person. Partly because I'm filming this video early and it's a little bit unclear about what I'm supposed to do, but also because the COVID cleanup is really, really, really important, and I want to make sure that we all understand and we're all on the same page. Okay, so there is a corresponding handout that describes the step-by-step of what I did, and of course you can email me with questions or email Nikki with questions, or come in during lab hours and have some assistance from the graduate students. All right, so get to work and enjoy your process. Bye-bye.